Her daughter-in-law told her to sleep outside in the cold because she snored too loud. The baby needed peace, she said. She didn't argue. She didn't ask questions. She just picked up her old shawl and stepped out onto the porch like a quiet servant. Please stay with me as I tell you my story. And don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. She was 68 years old, a widow. Her name was Martha. Life had not been easy for her, but she was used to that. She had only one son, David. She raised him alone after his father left. She gave him everything, every bit of love, every hour of work, every quiet sacrifice. So when David called and said his wife had given birth and they could use some help, she packed her bags. She was happy. A grandchild was a blessing. She thought maybe this was her second chance to have a little joy. At David's house, she cleaned without being asked. She cooked their meals. She washed clothes. She rocked the baby when Emily was too tired. She stayed quiet when the young couple argued. She tried not to be a burden, but Emily was never warm, always cold in her eyes, sharp in her words. David, once sweet and full of laughter, now barely looked at her. Still, she told herself, they're just tired. New parents. It's okay. One night, Emily came to her room. She crossed her arms and said, "The baby keeps waking up. Your snoring is too loud. Can you sleep outside? Just for tonight?" She stood there, waiting. David stood behind her, not saying a word. Finally, he said softly, "Just for tonight, Ma." She felt a crack deep inside her chest, but she nodded. No anger, no tears. She picked up her shawl, an old thing she'd knitted years ago, and walked outside to the porch. The air was cold, too cold for her bones. She found an old wooden bench, curled up, and pulled the shawl tight around her shoulders. Her back ached, her fingers shook, but she stayed silent. Behind her, through the window, she saw lights, heard laughter, the clink of dishes. No one came to check. No one asked if she was warm. She closed her eyes and tried to remember better nights. The first time she held David in her arms, his tiny fingers curling around hers, his soft breathing. She wondered how that tiny boy had grown into a man who let her sleep in the cold. That night, as the cold wrapped around her, she could not sleep. The old bench was hard, and the wind slipped through the holes in her shawl. Her fingers felt stiff, her knees hurt, but what hurt most was not the cold, it was the silence. The kind of silence that comes when people you love forget you are there. She stared at the dark sky and tried to keep her mind busy, but the memories came, soft and strong. She remembered the first time David cried as a baby. He was barely a week old when his father left. It was raining that day and she had no one to turn to. She picked up her baby, held him close, and rocked him through the night. His little face, so red from crying, had slowly calmed against her chest. She whispered to him again and again, "It's just you and me now. I won't ever leave you." And she didn't. All those years, she worked 2 jobs, skipped meals so he could eat, missed sleep so he could study. Every toy he had, every warm coat, came from her hands, her effort, her love. She gave him everything she could, and now, here she was, sleeping outside his house on a porch bench, because she snored. Inside, she heard laughter. Emily's voice, light and clear. The television was on. Dishes clinked. A baby's soft coo. Life went on without her. Not even a glance, not even a question. "Are you okay?" She pulled the shawl tighter and tried not to cry. Morning came slowly. Her body ached when she sat up. Her back was stiff, her legs numb. But when she opened the door and stepped inside, she smiled like nothing had happened. She moved to the kitchen quietly like always. Emily was feeding the baby. She didn't look up. David stood by the coffee maker. He saw her, but said nothing. Only gave a small, weak smile, like he didn't know what else to do. She wanted to hold his face, ask, "What happened to you, my son?" But she said nothing. She poured herself a cup of tea, sat down at the edge of the kitchen table, and listened to the sounds of the house she had come to help, where no one seemed to need her anymore. The cold from the night before was still in her bones, but worse than that was the cold of their silence. She woke up early, just like every morning. Her body still ached from sleeping outside, but she didn't show it. She went to the kitchen quietly and began preparing breakfast. Eggs, toast, warm porridge, the same way she used to make it for David when he was a boy. The house stayed quiet for a while, then footsteps. Emily walked in, holding the baby, followed by David, who looked half asleep. No one said good morning. No one said thank you. They sat down and ate without a word. After breakfast, she folded the baby's tiny clothes, neatly, carefully, with love. Emily picked one up and frowned. These are all wrinkled, she said. You're folding them wrong. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. What could she say? That she had folded baby clothes for David his whole life, that her hands, though tired, still worked with love. David stood nearby, sipping his coffee, eyes on his phone. He didn't say a word. He rarely did anymore. He always looked tired now, quiet, far away, like he had disappeared into someone she didn't recognize. Later that morning, the baby reached for her. His small arms stretched toward her as he babbled and kicked his legs. She smiled, her first real smile in days, and took him gently in her arms. His warmth, his smell, the way his fingers grabbed hers, it brought a little light back into her heart. But then Emily came quickly and took the baby back. He needs to spend more time with me, she said. He's getting confused. She stood still, her hands empty again. Later she sat by the window, watching the trees sway in the wind. She thought of the time she had held David like that, the songs she used to hum to calm him, the games they played, the way he used to laugh and run into her arms. Now he barely looked at her. She had become like a shadow in this house, moving around quietly, doing everything, yet unseen. A ghost, walking from room to room, carrying memories no one else remembered. And each morning, she made breakfast again, not for thanks, not for love, just because that's what she did. She stayed, but each day, a little more of her heart slipped away. She had been working on the sweater for weeks, each stitch made with love, each row filled with memories of the Christmases she used to share with David. The yarn was soft, warm, a gentle blue like the baby's eyes. She imagined him wearing it by the fireplace, maybe even taking his first Christmas photo in it. On Christmas morning, she wrapped it carefully in brown paper and tied it with a red ribbon. She placed it under the tree with quiet hope. Later, when the gifts were being opened, she handed it to Emily with a small smile. I made this for him, she said softly. Emily pulled it out of the paper, barely glanced at it, and wrinkled her nose. We don't want the baby wearing itchy things, she said, setting it aside on the couch like it was something used or unwanted. David stood nearby. He laughed weakly, scratching the back of his neck. Yeah, you know how babies are, he mumbled, not meeting her eyes. She said nothing, just nodded gently, even though something inside her folded in on itself. All day, she stayed quiet. She helped clean up, washed the dishes, swept the floor. As evening came, guests started arriving. Emily's friends, a few neighbors, the house filled with laughter, music, and warm food. No one asked her to join. No one knocked on her door. She stayed in her small room, lights off, sitting on the edge of the bed. She could hear the voices from the living room, cheerful, full of life. She looked at the small plate beside her, a little leftover rice she had saved from the afternoon, cold now. She ate it slowly, listening to the sound of clinking glasses and Christmas music from the other side of the wall. She had once dreamed of spending her later years surrounded by family, by joy, a grandchild in her arms, warm meals, quiet laughter, maybe even a few stories shared over tea. Instead, she sat alone, with her hands folded on her lap and the sweater tucked beside her in the dark. No one had touched it again. The soft blue yarn still smelled faintly of her home, of the life she had once known, of love that now had no place to go. It was early morning, and the house was quiet. She moved carefully around the kitchen, as always, trying not to wake anyone. She reached for the cupboard to get Emily's favorite mug, the white one with little pink flowers. She used it every morning without fail. Her hands were slower these days, not as steady as they once were. As she reached for the mug, it slipped through her fingers and hit the floor with a loud crash. Pieces scattered across the tile. She froze. Footsteps came quickly. Emily rushed in, eyes wide, then narrowed. Are you serious? She snapped. That was my favorite mug. You can't even hold a cup anymore. I'm sorry, she said softly, already bending down to pick up the pieces. Emily crossed her arms. This is exactly why I didn't want you here too long. You're not careful. You're not helping anymore. You're just here, a guest who overstays. She didn't know what hurt more, the words or the way Emily said them. Sharp, cold, like she didn't matter. David walked in a moment later, rubbing his eyes. What's going on? He asked. She broke my mug, Emily said quickly, turning to him. The one your aunt gave me. I've told her to stop using it. David looked at the broken pieces, then at his mother. His eyes lingered, but he said nothing. No defense, no kindness, just silence. Later that evening, David knocked gently on her door. He stepped inside, looked around like he didn't know what to say. She sat in her chair, knitting quietly, waiting. He cleared his throat. "Ma, maybe it's time we think about what's next. A place where you'd be comfortable, with people your age, where you don't have to do everything." She looked at him for a long time. This was her son, the boy she had raised with so much love. And now he was asking her to go, not with cruelty, but with distance, with the kind of voice people use when they're done trying. She nodded. "I understand," she said softly. He smiled a little, relieved, and left the room. She sat there in silence. It wasn't just a mug that broke that morning. Something inside her cracked too, something old and tender. And now, like an old chair no one wanted to sit in anymore, she was being gently pushed aside, discarded. The afternoon was quiet. The baby was napping, and Emily had taken a call in the other room. Martha moved slowly through the hallway, dusting the shelves, when she noticed an old cardboard box pushed behind a stack of books in the closet. Curious, she pulled it out and sat down with it on her lap. Inside were letters, dozens of them, neatly folded and yellowed with age. Her handwriting stared back at her from each envelope. "To David, from Mama." She opened one gently. It was a letter she had written when David was 7, tucked into his lunchbox on his first day of school. "I know you're scared, but you're brave," it read. "And no matter what, you will always have a home with me." Her fingers trembled as she read it again. Letter after letter told stories, offered comfort, shared dreams, birthdays, sick days, lonely nights. In every word, there was love, the kind of love only a mother could give. And now, here she was, in her son's house, a stranger in the background, unwanted and unseen. She had given him a home, but this house was not a home for her. The pain wasn't loud, it was quiet, deep, a quiet grief that settled in her bones like the cold did that night on the porch. That evening, as the sun dipped low, she sat on the edge of her bed holding the letter with the words, "You will always have a home with me." She smiled softly, not with joy, but with understanding. She would leave, not with anger, not to punish anyone. She would leave because it was time, because staying where she wasn't wanted hurt more than leaving ever could. She folded the letters back into the box with care. She didn't need to take them. The words were already inside her. As night fell, she began to pack her small bag. Just a few clothes, her knitting needle, a worn photo of David as a child, nothing more. She didn't tell anyone. She would wait until morning, but her heart had already stepped out the door. She woke up while the sky was still dark. The house was silent. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the space. She folded her blanket neatly, then went to her small desk and picked up a pen. Her hands didn't shake as she wrote the short note. "Thank you for the time. I'll be okay." That was all. No blame, no guilt, no begging for love. She placed the note on the kitchen counter where they would find it later, then picked up her small suitcase. It held only a few things: 2 dresses, a sweater, her knitting needle, and an old photograph of David when he was 7, smiling with missing teeth. She stepped outside as the first light of morning brushed the horizon. The air was cool and still. No one heard the soft click of the door closing behind her. At the bus stop, she sat quietly with her hands folded on her lap. The bus arrived a few minutes later, almost empty. She climbed in without looking back. The ride was long, but peaceful. The roads led her away from the city, through fields and trees, into quiet towns she had passed years ago. She stared out the window, watching the world go by. By the time the bus reached the small rural town, the sun was fully up. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where time moved slower, and where life felt softer. She stepped off the bus and walked 2 streets down to a little flower shop, with faded paint and a hand-painted sign, "Lena's Blossoms." Inside, behind the counter, stood Lena, her childhood friend. They hadn't seen each other in years, but the moment their eyes met, it was as if no time had passed. "Martha?" Lena said, surprised but smiling. She gave a small nod, and before she could say a word, Lena rushed over and wrapped her in a warm hug. "You don't have to explain," Lena whispered. "You're home now. No questions, no judgment, just love." That evening, Martha sat by the window in Lena's upstairs guest room. A small vase of daisies sat on the windowsill. The room smelled of fresh flowers and warm bread. For the first time in a long while, she let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. She was no longer unwanted. She was simply somewhere she belonged. The room was small, tucked away above Lena's flower shop, but it felt like a treasure. The curtains were soft yellow, dancing gently in the breeze. From the window, Martha could see the garden below, rows of tulips, daisies, roses, and marigolds stretching toward the sun. Each morning she woke up early, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She would open the window, breathe in the scent of fresh flowers, and feel the warm sunlight on her face. She helped Lena around the shop, watered the flowers, arranged little bouquets, took care of the pots out front. She didn't speak much at first, but the people who came into the shop were kind. They smiled when they saw her. "Good morning, Miss Martha," they'd say. "Those roses are looking extra lovely today." She didn't know when it happened exactly, but one morning she smiled back and meant it. The smile wasn't wide. It didn't erase the sadness that still sat quietly inside her, but it was real. It came from a place that had long been silent, a place that was slowly waking up again. In the afternoons, she sat by the window with a book in her lap or a pen in her hand. She had started writing in her journal again, not about pain, but about small joys, the way the garden looked in the morning light, the baby bird that had nested just outside the window, the sound of laughter from children passing by after school. No one called her a burden here. No one told her she was too loud or too old or in the way. She was just Martha, Miss Martha to some, a quiet, kind woman who smiled softly when she spoke and always had time to listen. She thought of David sometimes, of course, and the baby. She missed them both in a quiet way, but she didn't feel bitter, just distant, like that life had happened to someone else long ago. Now she had yellow curtains, warm tea, gentle work, and people who greeted her with kindness. It wasn't much, but it was enough, and for the first time in a long time, peace felt real. It had been almost 2 years since she left that house. The flower shop had become her world, quiet, gentle, and full of colour. She no longer woke up with heaviness in her chest. The yellow curtains still fluttered in the window, and her journal pages were full of garden notes and thoughts she no longer kept buried. One morning, Lena brought in the mail with a curious look. "This one's for you," she said, handing over an envelope. It was handwritten, the edges slightly smudged. She recognized the handwriting at once. David. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was simple, but soaked in emotion. The first lines were messy, as if written through tears. "Ma, I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to say I'm sorry, truly sorry." He went on to say that Emily had left him over a year ago, that she had taken another job out of state, and decided she no longer wanted to be a mother or a wife. He was raising their son alone now. The same baby who had once been too sensitive to snoring was now talking, walking, and asking questions. "He asked me the other day, 'Where is Grandma? Why doesn't she come?'" the letter said. I didn't have an answer. She paused reading. Her eyes blurred. The words continued. "You were the only one who ever truly loved us. You were always there, for me, for him, and I let you go without a fight. I was weak. I'm sorry, Ma. If you can forgive me, please. Just come visit. Just once. He misses you. I miss you." She folded the letter gently and held it to her chest. The room around her was quiet, but her heart beat loud. She didn't know what she would do yet. She wasn't ready to decide. But what struck her most was not just his sorrow. It was the truth in his words. He had finally seen her love. It had taken time, distance, and loss, but he saw it now. She looked out the window at the garden below. The flowers still bloomed, and in her heart, something opened, a space that had once been closed, a door that might, just maybe, open again. She stepped off the bus slowly, suitcase in hand. The town felt the same, but her heart beat a little faster with every step. David was waiting by the station, holding his son in his arms. The boy, now a bright-eyed toddler, wiggled down and ran toward her with open arms. "Grandma!" The word hit her like warm sunlight after a long, cold winter. She knelt, arms wide, and pulled him close. He smelled of apples and baby powder. She closed her eyes, holding him tight. 2 years of silence melted away in that one moment. David stood nearby, tears already in his eyes. He looked thinner, older, but his face was softer than she remembered. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. She looked at him for a long moment, then hugged him too. It was gentle but brief. Inside the house, everything felt familiar and distant at the same time. The same couch, the same curtains. But the warmth she had once begged for was missing. She played with her grandson on the floor, laughed as he showed her his toys, and helped him put together a puzzle. He handed her a small purple flower, carefully pressed between 2 pages of a book. "For you, Grandma," he whispered. That night, she sat with David after the child had gone to bed. He tried to talk, but his words stumbled. "I wish I could take it back," he said. All of it. She looked at him kindly. I know you do, she said. But some things break too deep to fix. His eyes dropped. She reached out and touched his hand. But I'll always love you, always. In the morning, she made tea and packed her small suitcase again. David didn't try to stop her. He stood at the door, holding the little boy in his arms. The child waved with both hands, smiling. Bye-bye, Grandma. She smiled through soft tears. Be good, little one. She walked away slowly, the pressed flower tucked safely inside her journal. As she stepped into the morning light, she looked up at the sky and smiled, not with sorrow, but with peace. She had come, but not to stay, and that was enough. Do you think Martha made the right choice by leaving after everything she went through? Or should she have stayed and given David a second chance to make things right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion. And if stories like Martha's touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.